This is your host, Stephen Brent Sargeant. I've talked about this subject before, but I am going to go into detail about how do you ace a crypto compliance interview. I'm going to give you specifics. I'm going to give you examples, game plans, and strategies. Shout out to all the people before I get started on my YouTube channel, Russ, Tana, Bincy out there, Dixon. I see you guys. I appreciate you. And some people are even getting jobs. I don't know. The YouTube's on and popping, and we're just growing our community. So let's get straight into it. The first thing you should do once you get the interview, even before you get the interview, I think sometimes is fix your resume. And I know you're thinking, well, Steven, I got the interview. My resume must have been good enough. But honestly, I've been speaking to a resume expert recently, Clementine. She's coming on the TCAE. Depending on when this gets released, it's Wednesday. And just even speaking to her about how to construct a useful and engaging resume, and being a recruiter and a hiring manager, 90% of the resumes I've seen are absolutely horrible. And my resume probably ranks on a 4 out of 10, but the ones I'm seeing are probably like negative 72. So one thing you should immediately go do is fix your resume. I strongly suggest a small investment in the resume writer is worth the difference between, I'd say, anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 sometimes when it comes to compensation. But I'll do a separate episode on the resume, but just something for you guys to keep in mind. Second thing, if you're applying to a company like a crypto exchange, like a service provider, make sure you go open up an account with them. So many people, when I was doing recruitment and hiring managers for a certain exchange, never actually use the product or service. It is so important. Take the 10 minutes, go sign up for an account, test it out, especially if you're going into an AML role or an onboarding KYC role, testing out the process, seeing where there's any challenges for an average user, documenting those things and maybe even highlighting them or bringing them up in the interview. It is so important to have an account open. Sometimes the hiring managers are going to check that before they have the interview. Are you actually using the products and services for the company that you want to apply to? And this goes far beyond just crypto compliance. This is just really good advice for anyone getting into a job where you can sign up for an account. The next thing would be to skim the terms and services. I know this is not the best idea. It's long, it's boring, it's legalities and legalese, but just skim through the terms of service or the terms of agreement, see if there's any verbiage around AML or things like prohibited jurisdictions, because these are conversations that you could bring up. You're going to have an opportunity to ask really engaging questions. And if you go on the terms of services and see those prohibited jurisdictions, you might be able to bring up situations that are affecting the industry right now. So we know that the UAE might be put on FATF's gray list. This might be something you talk about. I see A, B, and C country on the gray list. What do you do in certain scenarios like UAE that might not necessarily be on the gray list, but just even them considering them to be on the gray list for FATF could be reason enough internally, if you have don't have a huge risk tolerance, to maybe flag those organizations, entities, or individuals that may reside in those countries. You would sound pretty smart. Plus, you're talking about current events, so it shows that you're keeping your pulse to where the industry is and where the industry is going, and the kind of added value that you bring to a team. One thing that you should do before the actual interview, and I suggested this to someone I was talking to the other day, is set up your backdrop. Like, I see a lot of interviews, and I know it's not a big deal sometimes, but you know, the lighting's grainy, the video's grainy and blurry, the voice isn't there. You know, they don't know if they've connected yet. You're spending the first 3 or 4 minutes seeing if you've connected. Set up a time, maybe 20 minutes before the interview, where you can actually log on to the platform that you're using, whether that's a Zoom platform or something else, with a friend, family member, coworker, anyone, message me, and jump on a call beforehand to see how your mic is working, to see if you have lighting. Honestly, go above and beyond. get a really expensive mic, get a really expensive video recorder or camera or webcam, even if you have to return it. This could be the difference between landing a job and not landing a job. By standing out, having great lighting, great clear picture, people remember that. They remember the experience. If you're fully prepared, ready to go, not scrambling to see what's not working, your headset or the computer or the laptop or the Wi-Fi, get an Ethernet cable. I have 100-foot one that I can attach from probably here to down the street at the Tim Hortons if I needed it. Make sure, because these are the small things that could immediately side rail an interview. And then you start stressing, you start panicking, and you just don't come off already because it's one more thing you have to worry about in the interview. I like to add in little touches too. One thing I thought that stood out with being a part of several interviews is when people maybe had the flag of a country or the person that's interviewing them. Now, maybe they didn't do it on purpose, but it's definitely a great conversation starter and it breaks the ice. So maybe having I was telling somebody that might be interviewing for somebody that's maybe into a certain type of cryptocurrency or a certain NFT project, having some kind of visual in the background that might just stick into their memory is very, very useful. Another thing is to understand the basic questions. Some interviewers are going to use those basic questions like, tell me about your weaknesses. And although as recruiters and everyone else, we think those are BS questions, they may still come out. I'll attach a guide for an interview guide that I used. It's been super helpful. It helps you answer all the basic questions. It helps you formulate your storytelling throughout the interview process. And even better, it gives you an idea of how to pitch, because that first 3 minutes when they ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself, that has to be a pitch to them. That you have to be ready for that. You shouldn't be thinking of that only when they ask you that question. You should already have your 3-minute pitch, short, sweet, how you got there, add in a couple cool elements, any projects that you're contributing to, make sure you include it in that 3 to 4 minutes. We've seen too many tell me about yourselves go on for 5 minutes where the person gets cut off because they're starting from day one, starting from high school all the way out 15 years later to how they got to where they are. You have to make it short, sweet, and hit on those key points that you want them to remember. They're really just kind of testing your behavior here. Are you relaxed? Are you confident? These are some things that come out when you're asked, like, tell me about yourself. So I think Farafalla has brought this up many times in my comments as something that you have to be able to execute immediately and quickly. As well as understanding those basic questions, you should probably be able to sprinkle in some industry specific knowledge, right? Like, why is ransomware so important now? Because the US is starting to investigate like terrorist financing, cryptocurrency regulation coming in from the White House. These are all things. Rug pulls, if you're looking to get into an NFT project from a compliance angle. These are all things that you should have a basic understanding of, that you should be able to sprinkle into your conversation to let them know that you have your ear to the street and that you're continuously learning about cryptocurrency as it intersects with AML and compliance. And you're not just applying for a job just because you need a job and you could care less whether it's in crypto or not. One thing that I've actually forgot to include in my notes that I'll see if I can link a video to is something that I reached out to one of the best recruiters in fintech in Canada, Nako Mabele. One thing she told me about is be enthusiastic. Like, you should be leaping through the screen with your enthusiasm. You don't want to be overwhelming, but your eyes want to light up when you're talking about cryptocurrency or about this position. You want to use words like we. I always say use words like we when you're describing what the company should do or what you would do for that company. It changes the dynamic when you use the word, yes, I think we could use this strategy when approaching ransomware. Yes, I believe our policies and procedures should reflect this type of behavior. It changes mentally, subconsciously, something very small. But I think people rally behind you, including you envisioning yourself as part of their team and using words like our team. What would our team do in this situation? What is our team's approach during COVID and where we'll be working from? That changes the conversation then. What do you guys do when, or what does your team do? You know, it makes it really feel like you're a part of their community and their organization. Please, please, please be enthusiastic. This is not the time to play coy and act like you don't really want the job. Be enthusiastic. Right now, a lot of you are getting into jobs just based on your enthusiasm for crypto and not based on your knowledge. You don't even realize that. So this is one piece of advice, is to be enthusiastic, be excited to be on the call. There's nothing to feel nervous about. This is an opportunity for you to discuss what service you can bring to this organization and what excites you most about this industry and the position. You should always be able to answer the question, what interested you about this position, with a strong answer. And this is where I get the stop saying blockchain is the future or cryptocurrency is the future. That sounds like such a vanilla answer. It sounds like you haven't done any research, and you can go back to my other videos where I explain deep down why you shouldn't be saying this. You should have a approach. Well, what interested you about the position? Is it that you get to formulate or create a compliance program or work to create a compliance program? Is it because you're into DeFi and seeing that DeFi eventually will be regulated, or that you feel that the NFT communities need more compliance and safeguards and consumer protection? You have to have these crisp answers when you respond to these questions. Now we can even go into basic stuff like research the company. Now, I always say, like, don't just run to their mission statement or go on their website. I think, what is the ethos of this company? So when I think of companies like, let's say, Kraken, right? Their ethos is that they're going to be one of the only few, as of right now, bank charters, crypto companies. I don't know exactly what the infrastructure is there, but that's something they're probably going to be very, very proud of. They're also very proud of their security and privacy features. So those are things that you want to talk about. What are companies really proud of? Are they proud that they've never lost a coin to a hack or a vulnerability? Are they proud that they service an underserved community and they're huge on diversity and inclusion in the decentralized finance space? These are things that you need to, feel inspired that you're also in the same beliefs. Why go work with a company that you're not sharing the same initiatives, or at least some of the same morals, ethics, values, and beliefs that they do? So this is a really great opportunity to see in the news, what are they doing? What are they planning to do? And if you see that they're scaling up or they've acquired another company, you can talk a little bit about what you can bring to the table from a compliance sense. These are very important. And then the key to me is research the interviewer. If you win the interviewer, I feel like you win the interview. So let's just say my former partner in crime for the Chainalysis training, Melanie Lefebvre. If you know this because you've done the research, because you've gone and said, okay, Melanie Lefebvre, I Googled her. She's done a couple TCAE events. Let me go watch those TCAE events. If it's on YouTube, running at 2-speed, you just need the gist of what she's saying. Or if you don't know much about crypto, you should probably run it at half-speed and really let her knowledge absorb into you, because she's brilliant. But there's some key aspects that you know that she loves. She loves talking about mixers and the use cases for Mixer. She's a big privacy coin buff. So these are, if you want to establish some kind of a relationship, some kind of engagement with her, you can talk about, how do you handle privacy coins when it comes to your cryptocurrency exchange? Is this a huge red flag? How do you handle mixers? This is the way I see that mixers are being used, i.e. Tornado Cash, when it comes to DeFi projects that are being exploited. What is your take? Because now you can get her to now talk about things that she's passionate about. And it shows that you've done a little bit of research about her and how much she loves Monero. I would even go a step forward. Google some other privacy coins. There's one called Ironfish that's an emerging privacy coin. And you can ask her, after you've done a little research, what are her thoughts about these emerging privacy coins and ZK snarks and shielded pools? Because if she hasn't had the time to research that, you've already put her a step back and you've blown her mind, like, whoa, this person's really vested in privacy coins and talking about it. Or B, then she does know about it and she's just excited to go on a conversation with you. So these are ways you can win the interviewer. Research them. Have they been on any webinars? Most likely. Have they done any podcasts? Most likely. And don't just say, it's like, hey, I listened to your podcast, and then not have any knowledge about what was said in that podcast, which happens more than you think. Because if she asks you, like, oh, what did you think? Or what are your thoughts about the podcast? And you can't come up with one specific point about the podcast that you listen to, it shows you've actually never listened to the podcast. And right there, you've alienated the interviewer. And probably that's may not be a deal breaker, but trust me, that interview is not championing you through the interview process. So research the interview, make them feel comfortable, make them feel like you've actually watched, listened, interacted with their content, and bring specific subjects up, especially when you have time at the end to ask questions, because these are, if that's at the end and you're asking questions that the interviewer relates to, you're really leaving a huge lasting impression on the interviewer. We've already covered stuff like understanding the biggest challenges in the crypto space, like ransomware, like the company probably scaling their onboarding, and they may have depleted or thinned out compliance resources. Focus on some illicit activity that you know that's going on. Check out the Chainalysis crime reports. TRM Labs usually has up-to-date blogs, as well as the Elliptic, Solidus Lab. Every blockchain analytics company has some kind of report that you should be, or articles that you should be researching prior to the interview, so you can talk about the most relevant things that are happening in the industry, and show them that you have an interest of continuously updating your knowledge, which in the crypto compliance world is every single day that you have to do it. And then understand their culture, right? Like, these are where I would be asking questions. An interview goes both ways, and I talk about this all the time. That person has a job, but you have the skills that could potentially fill that job. And if you didn't, most likely they don't have time to be interviewing people on a whim. So you definitely have some sort of skills that they are looking for. So now this is a two-way conversation. You want to know if this company is right for you. If it's a remote work environment, you want to have a better understanding of what the culture is like. What do they do? Maybe asking questions about engaging employees in a remote only situation. How do they approach creating relationships with employees that they may never have met over the last 1 or 2? These are real questions. These are really great insights. How does your performance feedback? How will you know? How will you ask questions about how will you know that you're doing well or succeeding within the first 3 months, 6 months? How does the feedback loop work? How does your performance reports look? These are all really great questions. And there's ways that you can ask questions without asking about things like, how many vacation days do I have? Or when do we have our meetings? Because I may have to drop somebody, or I pick up, like, there's ways that you can ask. Hey, I see that you have people all over the world. When do you usually have your meetings? Is it based on a Canadian team or US team? Is it based on the overseas team? I'd just love to have an understanding of what do everyone have separate meetings. You can ask these questions to get specific answers that you need without seeming like you're focusing on yourself. Because once you start bringing up questions about vacations and scheduling right off the bat, it may rub interviewers the wrong way because they don't believe that you're going to be flexible. And although you may have to drop off a child and you may have to pick up a grandma, I understand that, but you don't want to be approaching the questions in that way early on in the interview, at all in the interview process, because I guarantee that's going to deter them from thinking that you're not a flexible employee. They're probably going to be flexible with you for the most part. And hey, this is crypto compliance. It's 24 hours. It's not the bank. They don't just shut down. The markets don't shut down at 5 o'clock. This is a 24/7. So you have to be a little bit flexible. And if you can't be flexible at all, then I'm assuming maybe crypto's not right for you, or you have to find a really flexible position for you to work into. This goes along with compensation. What I've noticed in cryptocurrency, they're not scared to ask about compensation expectations. They're not scared to talk about money in interviews. So do not get caught off guard by them asking about your compensation expectations and you not giving any thought about it. Have an idea what a market value is. for you in your position. Now, that might range. If there's 100 people in the compliance program, they may pay a lot less than teams that have maybe only 10 people and are probably working very lean and extended amount of hours. So keep that in mind. Every organization is different. I would take less money personally to work with better organizations. And I would also take less money to work in smaller organizations where I can grow and get more exposure to other business units. That might not be your approach. You may be trying to maximize how much you make and trying to get into a position no matter what type of company it is. So you should have an opportunity to say what you want and give them a range. I'd like to keep the range in between 10 and 15,000. Anything else after that is really not a range. You're just throwing numbers at them, in my opinion, because 10 to 15,000 leaves room for things like creative opportunities, right? Like, well, I might go on the lower end for things like equity and growth plans and education allowances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, stock shares, options, or at the top end, you're just taking no frills, no benefits, you're getting a large compensation and you're okay with that. I always like to bring up the opportunity to ask them to get paid in a creative way. Do you pay in crypto? Hey, if it's an NFT project, do you pay for early potential to mint certain projects? That if it's a marketplace, these are all really great questions because it sparks the employer to know that you're really in it, in the industry, right? You understand that, hey, getting paid in crypto is interesting. Be creative. Even if they don't do it, I think they respect the fact that you bring that up in a conversation, and be confident with your numbers. When somebody asks you, you should be able to say the amount confidently. You shouldn't be flipping through and talking to them about taxation. And you should understand at least what would be your pay if this was a self-employed opportunity where you have to pay your own taxes or be incorporated, and what would be your pay range if this is, I'm an employee of this company and they're taking taxes out. You should already know this information. There's only really 2 or 3 ways, I'm assuming. I'm not a tax person or giving tax advice, but there's only really 2 or 3 ways that you could possibly get paid. You should have these things in your mind. You should be able to say confidently what those numbers are, that you are flexible depending on certain things, but you have to be confident with your numbers. Stumbling with your numbers and not knowing and thinking about it or having to get back to them later, I don't believe is a good strategy, but other people might say it works. As I said, I like to just give people my thoughts and you pick and choose whatever resonates with you. I don't like to give advice because for every person it's different. Everyone has different needs. And lastly, make sure you have 3 amazing questions to ask. Try and slip them in throughout the interview. I would try to bring up little things throughout the interview. This is a discussion, remember. I think a lot of people go into an interview like they're just asking you questions and you're answering them. Try to ask questions throughout the interview to shift the onus on them to talk a little bit about their organization. This is a 2-way discussion. You want to make sure that that company is comfortable for you, especially in crypto. Companies are here today, gone tomorrow. You have to make sure this organization is long-term thinking. It's something that you want to do. And at least you can leave the interview knowing that you were confident in the interview process. There's nothing to be desperate about. This is not the only job. I don't even need to know what job it is. It's not the only job. It's not the only opportunity. Go in with your confidence. However, be self-aware. If you go into 3 or 4 interviews confident and asking for 20,000 over the market value and you're wondering why you're not getting second interviews, you will have to reassess or talk to other people in the industry to see if maybe you're a little bit off and maybe I'm high energy, so I know I'm going to turn a lot of people off. I don't mind that, to be quite honest. I love my energy and I think other people love it too. So I'm trying to attract the people that may be also high energy and want to execute at a high level and have fun doing it. Have your questions ready. Do not, when they ask you if you have any questions, no, I just want to know how many vacation, like, no. You don't need to know about your vacation days. What you need to do is ask really intelligent questions about either their core business or what their competition is doing versus what they're doing, and how do they approach similar situations? How do they see the next 3 years with growth or a crypto winter? What do they see when it comes to scam? Like these, and you've done a little, you have to do your research. So when you ask these questions, you already have the answers. You're more saying, these are my thoughts. How would you do it? Or this is what I think, but I don't know how you would do it internally. Have your questions ready. these have to stand out. These have to stand out. And remember, throughout the organization, not stop, but you don't need to tell them about your 5 years experience and your 6 certifications. They saw it on the resume. Talk about things that stand out. Like, what have you done to contribute maybe to the community? Maybe you've been a Discord community manager if you're getting into an NFT project. Maybe you've done working groups or contributed to other thought leadership, whether it's articles, blogs, or other working groups. Make sure you talk about those instead, and some variables that maybe not all the other candidates are going to talk about to make you really stand out. I hope this helps, guys. I'm probably gonna have to do another one based on interviews. And remember, mock interviews with other people. That's super important. You should be sounding confident. I just record all my conversations. Unfortunately, I have to look at them. I usually do that 2-speed. Thank you guys all for subscribing to the YouTube, for blowing up my comments on LinkedIn. I appreciate you guys. You guys are the fuel that keeps me going. And honestly, 2022 is just going to be a beast of a year. And I can't wait to fill you guys in with all the fun things that are going to happen. Talk soon.